Think about it. Every hiring decision is a choice that can make or break a team, a culture, and even an entire company. So how do we make the right choice? Hi, I'm Dr. Mickey, and welcome to Inside the Mind of Hiring. Here we'll uncover the psychology and strategy behind effective hiring. Because the right fit isn't just about skill or experience. It's about understanding people, their motivations, their strengths, and the shadows of their shortcomings. Together, we'll tackle the tough questions. How do we look beyond bias? How do we find the qualities that make people not just qualified hires, but the right hires? This is about identifying leaders who drive success, lift morale, and actualize a company's vision. Inside the Mind of Hiring starts now.
Hey everybody, I'm Dr. Pat, and I get to do this great show with Dr. Mickey Fineberg. And today, this is the conundrum show. This is the one where if you've ever been on the hiring, so have any of you been out there and your boss has said to you, well, you need to go. I think you should be on the hiring team. And you just looked and said, what? No, Mickey,
Right.
that's Dr. Mickey, that's what they say. They're like, oh, you've never had this kind of job. You need to be on the hiring team. I'm like, what is a hiring team? That's what today's show is about. Ensuring the right fit selections, the power of hiring teams. Now, we're going to walk you through what are we talking about. Just so you know, a hiring team doesn't have to be 100 people. 2 people can be a hiring team, but then you've got Dr. Mickey. Yeah. So today we're going to recap what we did last time, and we're going to talk about what is the anatomy of a successful hiring team. Dr. Mickey, right?
Right. Okay. So yeah, that's what we're going to focus on today. We talked about the vetting, the basic vetting elements last time with single person or small group, multiple interviews of a candidate. We were sort of talking about senior candidates that would be interviewed by senior executives. And we also talked about adding the psychological assessment element to the vetting or valuation process as well, which includes an interview. And we talked about 4 standard assessment instruments that are taken online. And then, the psychologist burns his brain cells and puts out maybe a 4-page report and sends it to the client. And what I hope is, because I offer this all the time, that the report isn't buried, or maybe somebody makes a decision on the report, or it's ignored. I'd like to see some participation based on the report and the client's experiences, the hiring team experiences, so we can put our heads together and talk about a candidate's strengths and concerns and the issues related to the job and the environment, and make the best possible decision, which is a successful hiring decision or not to hire.
Look, I was talking to somebody the other day and they're like, well, give me a real life example of hiring teams. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's not enough. I said, okay, I'm going to give you a perfect example. I said, look, you are glued to the television for the NFL draft. Now, here's what I want to say. I listen to you every year agonize over I can't use the language on the show, people in the organization, better known as a team, a hiring team, that makes these decisions. Yeah. And so every day in our lives, we are putting teams together to make decisions. Today, this is about hiring. And if you don't want to get fired before you are hired, this is the show you want to listen to.
Right. Well, successful hiring teams, Dr. Pat, they usually have a facilitator. Facilitator could be myself as the business psychologist who's involved in the assessment, or the lead hiring manager could be a facilitator as well, or both of us could sort of play a role in that. But what we're looking for is a wide open arena. My goodness, you're talking about the NFL draft. They better be all participating in that in a meaningful way, because bad draft selections can be pretty costly to a team, and great
Uh,
selections can be great.
yeah, we're not going to talk about the Denver Broncos. Uh-oh,
Mm.
Jessica, you heard that.
Right.
But even when you look at that, there are some things that happen, but we never really understand if that team is a highly effective team. There's a movie with Tom Cruise. It's called
Yeah,
Oblivion, and I love this movie. It really didn't make great popularity, but they're always asked, Tom and his partner, "Are you an effective team?" And if you
right,
watch the movie, it is a perfect example of how you are an effective team and then you're not.
right.
Let's talk about this from where you sit. You have done so many of these, Dr. Mickey.
I would, yes, I have.
Let's tell some stories here because I think if we give an example, people will get it.
Yeah,
What are
well,
some of the successful teams you've worked with?
right, right. I'm going to get to that, but I'm looking for a wide open discussion, equitable participation, and with the understanding that candidates impact hiring managers or hiring team members in different ways. So you gotta hear those perspectives. It's very important to hear those perspectives. And one successful, I have actually a couple of examples of successful team decisions and discussions, but was a CEO. I'm gonna mix the genders here because it's realistic. We have a guy as a CEO candidate for a private equity backed company, and the private equity principals, who are pretty sharp, typically pretty sharp folks, are involved in this discussion with me, and we both kind of see this candidate as qualified experientially, really driven, positive, upbeat, kind of like a real cheerleader, but we're all taken positively by that, and we like the candidate's leadership history, and it really the guy really seems like he could motivate people and collaborate and create a really nice environment for a private equity's expected growth, which is significant profitable growth in 5 years, and then we sell it to the advantage of the private equity principals and the shareholders. So that's really, really important. In this case, there was some disagreement among team members in terms of the CEO candidate's ability to and think in a visionary or strategic way. We all agreed that he could be a great operator, very inspirational, and really get things done tactically, operationally. But there was some concern about his strategic thinking and ability. And actually, I had a little concern about that. His intellect along these lines was low average for management, which is not great for a CEO. His practical intellect was through the roof, really strong. And his inclinations, not a lot of imagination, just somebody that is a little bit of a meat and potatoes guy, but very good at that. And so we talked about that, and they challenged some who were more positive about their experiences along those lines with this candidate, questioned me pretty strongly about why I was saying what I was saying, and I kind of stuck with it. But one principal, one of the team members said, Dr. Mickey predicted this about 2 or 3 times with other candidates, and we've kind of observed that. That's what we found that we got. Well, I said, well, I wouldn't necessarily deep six this candidate based on that. Let's talk about how important strategic capability and inclinations are. And then, what they said is, we really got to execute the program. We have to have somebody that really executes what we're trying to do. And I said, there's enough private equity, intellectual, strategic horsepower on this team to really support this person and help coach them and maximize their participation and get them involved strategically. And we could support this. We could help the person find benchmarking situations. We can really create expectations and input to get this out of the person. assist them along these lines in a direct and indirect sense. And we need it to happen. So they decided that they could compensate for this candidate. And they made without me being involved, because I don't think I should be directly involved in the decision per se. They offered this fellow the job, and he came in and he did a great job. And the company had a very successful sale in about 5 years. So that's an example of a success story right there.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
But the reason we're sharing this is because there is an enormous value to hiring teams. And there's also an unpredictable dynamic that can show up on these teams. But to have you there, and I think this is a common mistake organizations that hire at this level make. They don't get someone like you involved. They don't go through the science. They don't go through the testing. They just don't do it. And even sometimes when they do it, they're like, that's just a test. I like her.
Right.
I like him. I like them. Right.
Right. Yeah. They fall in love in the first 10 minutes and they spend the rest of the time defending their choice. Right.
I'm so guilty of that. I mean, if you talk to Linda is an outstanding recruiter. Linda did some of the top recruiting for Bell Labs and Lucent when it was at the top of its game. But she, boy, if you ever got her in a room, she was not going to hold back. She would say to the hiring team, you can hire this person based on their IQ.
Right.
And then she'd say something like, do you care if they tie their shoe? Now, what is she trying to say? What is she trying to say?
Yeah.
She's trying to say, look, if you just want IQ, you're good. But if you want this person to file for patents, if you want this person to be super organized, and by the way, here's one thing, Dr. Mickey, I would want you to address. Does this person have to work well with other people?
Really?
Well, you know what I'm talking about. But these are what you get paid the big bucks for. These are the type of questions that a hiring team isn't necessarily going to look at. What happens when you don't have such a great Disney story?
Okay. Here's a good example of a mistake. We have a supermarket chain, a regional chain, very successful, well regarded for many years. Big stores, 3 states, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. And they're in the 3rd generation of the business. So that means in this case, there were 9 cousins who were in management and executive roles with the company. 9 cousins, and that includes the CEO. They didn't see their way, and they're very successful, but they didn't see their way clear for a 4th generation. They knew the jig was up in a sense. And what they wanted, the CEO basically spearheaded this. He decided that he wanted to get the family members more into ownership and board level and community-based roles and not in management and leadership roles, and bring seasoned professional leaders into the organization and accelerate its growth for the next 3 years, and then have a unbelievable sale. That was his vision. And I helped him with the transition of the family members. Some were still a little bit kicking and screaming when we were going over this VP merchandising candidate. And they never had a VP merchandising candidate. All the separate department leaders, which were directors, and often the family members, reported to the CEO directly. So they decided to pull this merchandising, the departmental, when I talk about departments, I'm talking about grocery, meat, fish, and chicken, and non-foods, all those departments together, and somebody to provide really great leadership for that. So that was one of the key hires that they were looking for. And the hiring team was actually the family shareholders, the 9 cousins, which also included the CEO. And this candidate was very well regarded. strong but positive personality in many regards. That's at least how I experienced him. I'm sorry, it was I think him. No. This was years ago. This was a she. This is a she. I'm sorry. And so she made a good impression virtually on everybody. And but there was the concern that some people raised about this candidate is she going to be a little bit too directive, a little bit too controlling, a little bit too dominant? And basically, I saw that in the data and talked about that. But, I was leaning more towards benevolence because there was a lot of charm in her, which to me kind of translated towards empathy, had some semblance of how other people were dealing with her and could read people pretty well. I thought, but I was concerned about that factor as well. And we had to flesh that out. And what um, uh, we basically, what they decided was these departments need direction. We have to grow this thing in 3 years, and these departments need direction. So we don't mind somebody that's directive as long as they're reasonably, magnanimous about it. And so we basically, there was somewhat of a consensus in the room, except for the person who was the produce director and one of the cousins.
Yeah.
And he basically said this lady is arrogant. She's not empathetic. I have a real problem with her. I didn't really have a good experience with her. And interestingly enough, this team member was a little bit, what's the word I'm trying to look? He's a little bit irreverent in his style. And I always thought he was great, but definitely irreverent in his style. And I think he probably presented that to her, and she had a negative reaction to it. And it really showed up for him, and he reported it to the group and wanted the group to really understand it. So we worked through it, but he was actually saw himself as a candidate for that position.
Exactly.
The merchandising position. So the cousins kind of saw him as a little bit biased. And frankly, I saw him as a little bit biased myself. And in that regard. And, and they said, the department really needs direction. So they ended up overruling him. They overruled him. And, I could see the concern, but the candidate was hired, and she came in and failed in 6 months.
Well, you're going to fail. You're going to fail. So let's talk about that failure, though. Did the candidate fail? Was it, okay, y'all can email me later, but I do have something really positive to say about Carly Fiorina. Was it a Carly Fiorina fail? And what do I mean by that is, and I know right out of the gate, Dr. Mickey, when you have a team that is divided and your person does not get picked.
Right.
What happens behind the scene is you're either going to support their success or not. And so teams really have to think about their own dynamic, right? This is part of it. Now, you and I could spend an entire show, and I'd love to do a Carly Fiorina case study.
Right.
Because
quite a case study.
It's a great case study because what did she do? How was she hired? And HP, hello, look at the HP organizational infrastructure and culture.
Right.
But did this person fit the culture, Dr. Mickey? That's the question. Did this woman fit that culture in a way that they needed?
Right. And but supermarket organizations, and by the way, I lied, I apologize. I remember this like it was yesterday. It was really a guy. But I wanted to mix the genders. But supermarkets tend to be, and it's a family enterprise, they tend to be a little bit top down.
Yes.
And so, I had a little more room for that style in this culture, but but he turned out to be a pretty negative player and turned off a lot of people.
Yeah.
And what I learned from this is listen to the minority, listen to that outlier, because he had a tendency to bring out the worst in people. And if they, but they didn't have to do that. I'm sorry, he didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
He didn't have to, he ended up fighting with this guy a little bit. And, he brought out the worst in him. And he wanted the group to know about it. It wasn't blatant, but it was enough for him to recognize it. And you got to go sometimes with that one voice that's different from everybody else and distinctly different. And sometimes you just have to go with that voice. You can I believe that there's candidates out there that would qualify for this job that would have more of a unanimous reaction. And I think that's probably what they should have gone for in hindsight. They corrected their mistake in 6 months and brought in somebody, and it turned out to be a hugely successful sale in 3 years. It's just a great story of a family business that was so successful. But they could have saved some time and made some headway. And
aggravation. I mean, you and I talked about this in an earlier show, what the cost is of making very poor hiring decisions. And it's not just hard on the company. I want to really give a shout out for the person. I follow the case study of Carly Fiorina really quite closely. And because I was asked to include her in my research in a case study. Right. And so I followed her. And when I saw the press, my data was very different about her. And I often wonder, and you and I should really look at some of these hires. Right now, I'm looking at some of the entertainment hires. Because what do you want in your company? Linda, myself, and Jessica, since we started doing this show with you, we're really looking at how we hire, how the three of us hire. And one of the things we're really asking ourselves, are we willing to continue to hire without having a unanimous decision?
Right.
Now, that is not easy, Dr. Mickey.
It's not.
But we have to do that here.
Yeah, I really believe that, especially if one outlier is strong in their feelings about something. You got to recognize that. If they're kind of, they can be moved one way or the other, it's different. But if they're really strong and polarized in their feelings, you really have to acknowledge that. And something else that you said, you have to know what you're really looking for. In that private equity example, they had to really think, because everybody loves strategy. It's like the sexiest thing in the world.
It really is.
The person can't think or is not inclined to think strategically, all of a sudden they're a loser, but it's not the case. When they really talked about what they were looking for and how they could support this individual, it turned out to be a great situation for them.
Yeah, I love this conversation. I can't wait until we do the next show because I really want to break this down. One of my greatest disappointments in my corporate job was, and my greatest gifts and talents, what the universe gave me, was I was ready to become a director. I had done everything they've said. I went back to school. I got my degree. It took me like a long time, but I did go get it. And I was now ready. And they looked at me and they said, but you've never had a line job. And I said, but I'm applying to be the executive assistant for the president. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to run the cafeteria? How is the president? But what they were doing is, it was a stalling tactic. So I got a job in graphics and I became one of the top managers in graphics. But I'll tell you this, and we'll talk about this in another show. Had I not gotten that job, I wouldn't have the skill I have today in managing my team. I don't think my team, because I don't talk about myself, I don't think my producers understands the depth and the breadth of graphic knowledge I have, because I don't talk about that job.
Right.
But we turned a failing graphics company, a minus $3 to $4 million inner service. We automated it and turned it around.
Wow.
But I wouldn't have done it, and I wouldn't have had the mentorship of Mary Louise Smith. And I would ask myself, I talked to Linda the other day, and I said, Linda, that hiring decision that they made to hire me for that job, do you think they just wanted me to fail? And Linda says, oh, there's no question about it.
Right.
And then she looked at me and she said, yeah, but they didn't know The team didn't know you were going to show up at 3 a.m. at the strip joint where your graphic designers were drinking at the strip club
Right.
down the road.
Right.
And she said, that's why you got hired. That's why Mary Louise took you.
Right.
Now, on our next show and this show, there's a message for hiring teams. You've got to call Dr. Mickey because the world is changing and you
Oh,
cannot
yes.
afford, but companies cannot afford to make a bad decision now.
Yeah, I mean, time is of the essence. You don't want to waste time and a lot of money in making the wrong decision if you can avoid it at all. It really, I mean, it was expensive. That little mistake that lasted just 6 months for that VP merchandising was an expensive mistake, and also did a lot to flatten morale in that merchandising group. Yeah,
Horrible.
Yeah.
I want to give people a sneak peek. I'm going to be taking Dr. Mickey's assessments. We're going to be sharing that. We're going to be sharing that in one of the upcoming shows.
Great.
But I want you all to really listen to what Dr. Mickey's saying, because when you look on the surface and you look at the Lee Iacocca's and the other people and the Carly Fiorinos, when you look at that hiring decision, it was one of the best decisions HP could have made. Why? Merger with Compaq. Every product on the product line increased profitability. In the history of HP, I don't believe they have ever had quite that success in such a short period of time. But what are we talking about? The firing of Carly Fiorino. But under her realm,
right,
merged with Compaq. Yes, she let go of 30,000 workers. But why are we having why is that a sore point for Carly? Is it because she's a woman and did it? Because that is happening everywhere. The bottom line is every product in HP lagged. When they fired her, every product in HP did not.
Right.
Carly, come work for us.
Well, they didn't like her methods, but the result was certainly there, right?
I don't know if they didn't like. I mean, come on. 2005 and downsizing. Let's get with the program, people.
Okay. Grow up, guys. Grow up. Women can be tough too.
Dr. Mickey, how do people find out more about Delta Consultants?
Well, you can look up the website, which is deltaconsultants.com. Look me up on LinkedIn. That's Mickey, Dr. Mickey Fineberg, Fineberg, or write me at mickey@deltaconsultants.com.
And I want to leave you all with a challenge. For the next show, I want you to send me an email at info@the Dr. Pat Show. And I'd like you to tell me who is the worst, what you think was the worst executive firing that has ever happened in the past 30 years. Which executive got fired that you think, what were they thinking? Let us know who it is. Thank you so much, everybody.
Great. Good idea.
I want to know, who do you think? What was the biggest flub that you could possibly think about? And Dr. Mickey and I will bring our candidates to the table. We'll see you all next time.
You have been listening to Inside the Mind of Hiring with me, Dr. Mickey Feinberg. Tune in the first and third Tuesday at 11 on Transformation Talk Radio to discover the psychology of making successful hiring decisions. In each episode, hiring managers and HR pros will learn how to leverage assessments and other key screening sources and avoid common pitfalls. Job seekers will gain insight into successfully presenting themselves. For more information on assessing people for mission-critical jobs and on career assessment and coaching, visit deltaconsultants.com and my LinkedIn profile. If you'd like to write me personally, it's Mickey, Mickey, @deltaconsultants.com.